The espresso machine hissed and steamed as Emily Grant pressed down the portafilter with practiced efficiency. 6 months working at the Morning Brew Cafe had turned these movements into muscle memory. Pull the shot, steam the milk, pour the latte art that customers barely notice before scrolling through their phones. Repeat. She glanced at the clock mounted above the pastry display. 7:14 in the morning. Her heart rate kicked up a notch. An involuntary response she'd stopped trying to control weeks ago. He would walk through that door in exactly 1 minute. "You're doing it again," Kayla whispered, wiping down the espresso machine beside her. Her coworker had worked at the cafe for 3 years and knew every regular by name and order. "That look on your face." "What look?" "The one you get every morning at 7:15. Kayla's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Like you're trying not to look at the door but can't help yourself." Emily felt heat crawl up her neck. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Kayla bumped her shoulder playfully. "Tall, dark, and dangerous is about to walk through that door, order his double espresso, leave an unnecessarily large tip, and sit in his corner booth, staring at you for exactly 43 minutes before he leaves. Same as every single day for the past 6 months. You timed it?" "Of course I timed it. Someone has to document your tragic romance." "It's not a romance," Emily protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "He's just a regular customer." "A regular customer who tips $50 on a $3 espresso?" "Emily, honey, that man is not here for the coffee." Before Emily could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Her breath caught despite herself. Alexander Rossi walked into the Morning Brew Cafe the way he did everything, with absolute command of the space around him. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body. Dark hair swept back from a face of sharp angles and aristocratic features. But it was his eyes that always caught her. Deep brown, almost black in certain light, and currently fixed directly on her. The cafe, busy with the morning rush, seemed to part around him. Regular customers instinctively stepped aside without quite knowing why. Their survival instincts recognized what their conscious minds might miss. This was a man who did not yield space. This was a man who took it. "Good morning, Mr. Rossi," Emily said, proud that her voice came out steady. "Emily," he said her name like it mattered, like those 2 syllables carried weight. His voice was deep, accented ever so slightly with something that suggested old money and older tradition. "The usual, please. Double espresso. Coming right up." She turned to the machine, hyper-aware of him watching her work. His gaze felt physical, a touch between her shoulder blades as she ground the beans, tamped the grounds, locked the portafilter into place. She could feel Kayla practically vibrating with suppressed laughter beside her. The espresso pulled dark and rich, perfect crema on top. Emily placed it on a small ceramic saucer and carried it to where Alexander had claimed his usual booth in the back corner. The location gave him a clear view of both entrances, she'd noticed. He always sat with his back to the wall. "Thank you." His fingers brushed hers as he took the cup. The contact lasted a fraction of a second, barely there, but it sent electricity shooting up her arm. His eyes held hers for a beat too long before she pulled away. "Let me know if you need anything else." "I will." Emily retreated behind the counter, her heart hammering in her chest like she'd just run a marathon instead of walking 15 feet. This was ridiculous. She was 26 years old, not some teenager with a crush. And yet every morning, 7:15 sharp, her entire body seemed to wake up in ways that had nothing to do with the 3 hours of sleep she'd managed to scrape together. "Girl," Kayla breathed beside her. "The tension between you two could power the entire city." "There's no tension. You are such a liar," Kayla grinned. "So when are you going to let that man take you to dinner?" "Never. He hasn't asked, and he won't." "Why not?" "You're gorgeous. He clearly can't take his eyes off you. And unless my radar is completely broken, which it is not, that man is very much interested." Emily shook her head, focusing on the next drink order. "You don't understand. Men like that don't date women like me." "Men like what?" Emily lowered her voice, glancing toward the back booth where Alexander sat reading something on his phone, espresso cup cradled in one large hand. "Kayla, we both know who he is. Everyone knows." The whispers aren't exactly subtle. Kayla's expression sobered slightly. She leaned in closer. Okay, yes. Alexander Rossi is not exactly your average businessman. The Rossi family has a certain reputation. But that doesn't mean he's not a person. A dangerous person. Maybe. But he's never been anything but respectful here. And the way he looks at you? Emily, that's not dangerous. That's interested. Emily wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Her stomach dropped. Unknown number. She knew what that meant. Payment overdue. Don't ignore us. She quickly shoved the phone back in her pocket, forcing a smile as she took the next customer's order. But her hands shook slightly as she made their latte, and she could feel the weight of worry settling back onto her shoulders like a familiar suffocating blanket. 6 months ago, Emily had made a choice. Her mother, Sarah Grant, had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The insurance company had approved standard chemotherapy, but denied coverage for a newer experimental treatment that had shown significantly better results. The treatment that might actually save her mother's life. Emily had exhausted every legitimate option. Bank loans denied due to her limited credit history and income. Medical financing companies offered terms she couldn't possibly meet. Fundraising efforts had raised barely $2,000, and her mother was getting sicker by the day. So Emily had done what desperate people do. She'd asked the wrong questions to the right people and found herself sitting across from a man in a back office of a pawn shop, signing papers she barely understood for $15,000. The money had saved her mother's life. The treatment was working. Sarah was in her 8th month of chemotherapy now, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. The tumors were shrinking. Her mother might actually beat this thing, but the cost was drowning Emily alive. $15,000 borrowed, $20,000 already paid back through 6 months of double shifts, weekend catering gigs, and living on ramen and coffee. And she still owed $30,000 because the interest rates were predatory and completely illegal and absolutely real. The morning rush finally slowed around 10. Emily was wiping down tables when her phone buzzed again. And again. And again. 3 calls in rapid succession, all from blocked numbers. She didn't answer. She knew what they wanted, and she didn't have it. At 11:30, the door opened and 2 men walked in. Emily's blood turned to ice. They weren't trying to blend in. Leather jackets despite the warm Boston morning. Jeans and boots. Tattoos visible on their necks and hands. They walked with the kind of casual menace that came from people who'd done violence and expected to do more. And they walked straight toward the counter. Emily Grant? The taller one asked, though his tone made it clear he knew exactly who she was. Every customer in the cafe seemed to sense something wrong. Conversations died. People stopped stirring their coffee. Yes? Emily's voice came out smaller than she wanted. We have a message from our mutual friends about your outstanding balance. Emily's throat went dry. I told them I need more time. I'm working as much as I can. Time's up, sweetheart. You've had 6 months. You've paid back what you borrowed, sure, but you knew about the interest. You signed the contract. That contract is predatory, Emily said, her voice shaking. I've already paid more than I borrowed. Not our problem. You owe $30,000. We want $10,000 by end of day today. Consider it a good faith payment. I don't have $10,000. I barely have $100. The shorter man leaned against the counter, deliberately invading her space. Then I suggest you figure it out. Call your family, your friends, that pretty coworker of yours. He glanced at Kayla, who'd frozen behind the espresso machine. Maybe she's got some money saved up. Leave her out of this, Emily said quickly. Then get us our money. We'll be back at 6 o'clock tonight, right here. $10,000 or things get ugly for you. Kayla found her voice. You need to leave. This is a place of business, and you're harassing our staff. The taller man turned his attention to Kayla. Brave, stupid, but brave. He took a step toward her. You want to be a hero, sweetheart? You want to get involved in business that doesn't concern you? Don't call me sweetheart. He laughed, reaching out to push Kayla aside dismissively. Kayla stumbled back a step, catching herself on the counter. Emily opened her mouth to protest, fear and anger warring in her chest. And Alexander Rossi stood up. He didn't speak, didn't raise his voice, didn't make any dramatic gestures. He simply stood. And somehow that single action changed the entire atmosphere of the cafe. It was like a predator had just revealed itself, and every prey animal in the vicinity suddenly remembered what fear tasted like. The two men turned toward him. Emily watched their expressions shift from casual menace to something else entirely. Recognition, then fear. "We don't have business with you," the taller man said, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Alexander walked toward them with measured steps. Not rushed, not threatening, just inevitable. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only those nearest could hear, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "You put your hands on that woman. You threatened this establishment. You created a disturbance that frightened the staff and customers." He paused. "I suggest you leave. Now. And do not return. Look, we're just collecting a legitimate debt. The girl borrowed money. She needs to pay it back." Alexander's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes turned glacial. "I am going to say this once. Leave this cafe. Leave this woman alone. Do not come back. If I have to repeat myself, you will not enjoy the conversation." The shorter man tried to save face. "You don't know who you're talking to. Our organization, I know exactly who you work for. The question is whether you know who you're speaking to." Alexander tilted his head slightly. "Do you?" Silence. Long enough to be uncomfortable. Long enough for the two men to remember rumors they'd heard, warnings from people higher up the chain. Long enough to realize they'd just made a very serious mistake. "We'll go," the taller man finally said. "But the debt doesn't disappear just because you scared us off. She still owes, and our people will collect." They left quickly, the bell above the door chiming cheerfully as if nothing had happened. The cafe remained silent for another beat. Then, slowly, conversation resumed. Customers turned back to their phones and laptops. But Emily stood frozen behind the counter, her entire body trembling. Alexander returned to his booth, picked up his empty espresso cup, and brought it to the counter. He placed it gently on the surface in front of Emily, along with 5 crisp $20 bills and a small black business card with a single number embossed in gold. "Thank you for the coffee," he said quietly, his eyes holding hers. "If you need anything, that number reaches me directly, day or night, any reason." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Emily staring at the card in her shaking hands. Kayla materialized beside her, eyes wide. "Do you know who that was? I mean, really know? You said he was Alexander Rossi." "Yes, Alexander Rossi, head of the Rossi family, one of the most powerful crime families in Boston." "Emily, that man just threatened loan sharks on your behalf. Do you understand what that means?" Emily stared at the card. "Simple, elegant, terrifying. What does it mean?" "It means you're on his radar now. It means he's interested. It means your life just got a lot more complicated." Emily slipped the card into her apron pocket. "I'm not calling him. I can't owe people like that favors. Those guys who just left? They're going to report back to whoever they work for. This isn't over. I'll figure it out. I always do." But even as Emily said it, she knew it wasn't true. She was out of options, out of time, out of everything except fear and exhaustion and the growing certainty that things were about to get much worse before they got better. The rest of her shift passed in a haze. The phone calls started around 2. Blocked numbers, over and over. She let them go to voicemail. The messages grew progressively more threatening. "You think your boyfriend can protect you? We know where you live. Tonight. We're coming for what you owe." By the time 6 o'clock came and her shift ended, Emily's hands were shaking so badly she could barely tie her apron. The two men from earlier didn't show up at the cafe like they'd promised. Somehow that was worse, not knowing when or where they'd appear next. She walked home through streets that suddenly felt hostile. Every car that slowed made her heart race. Every person who looked at her twice made her wonder if they were following her. The card in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, a lifeline she was too proud or too scared to use. Over the next 3 days, the pressure intensified. More calls, more messages. Men she didn't recognize started appearing outside the cafe during her shifts, watching through the windows. One night, she came home to find her apartment building's front door ajar, though nothing inside her apartment had been disturbed. A warning. Her mother called from the hospital, worried because Emily sounded stressed. Emily lied, said everything was fine, that work was just busy. Sarah was getting better. That's what mattered. Emily couldn't let her mother know about any of this. Alexander continued appearing at the cafe every morning at 7:15. But now his observation felt different, more intense, more protective. Once, when one of the watching men got too close to the cafe entrance, Alexander made a single phone call and the man disappeared within minutes. Emily knew she should be grateful, knew she should probably use that card, ask for help, let someone with power and resources handle this situation she couldn't control. But pride and fear kept her silent. She'd gotten herself into this mess. She'd find a way out. On the fourth night after the confrontation at the cafe, Emily lay awake in her apartment at 1 a.m, staring at her ceiling, trying to figure out where she could possibly get $10,000. Her phone sat on her nightstand, the black business card tucked into the case. She picked up both, turning the card over in her fingers. One phone call. That's all it would take. But Emily Grant had spent her whole life handling her own problems. Asking for help from a man like Alexander Rossi felt like stepping off a cliff, with no idea where she'd land. She put the card back, turned off her phone, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she'd figure something out. She always did. Tomorrow. The sound of shattering glass ripped Emily from shallow sleep at 2:17 in the morning. For a moment, she lay frozen in her bed, heart hammering, telling herself it was nothing. A car accident outside. Something falling in another apartment. Anything except what her instincts were screaming it was. Then she heard the voices. Male. Rough. Coming from inside her apartment. Where is she? Check the bedroom. Emily's body moved before her mind fully caught up. She rolled out of bed, grabbed her phone from the nightstand and ran for the bathroom. The only room in her tiny studio with a door that locked. Her hands shook so violently she could barely turn the pathetic lock, the kind that wouldn't hold against a determined child, let alone grown men with bad intentions. She backed into the corner between the toilet and the wall, making herself as small as possible. Phone clutched against her chest. Through the thin bathroom door, she could hear them destroying her apartment. The crash of furniture being overturned, the sound of dishes smashing, her belongings being torn apart. Boss said she owes $30,000. Time to make her understand we're serious. Maybe she ran. Windows open. Fire escape, check it. Already did. She's here somewhere, probably hiding. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. Her entire body trembled with adrenaline and terror. This was really happening. The threats had been real, and she was trapped in a fourth-floor apartment in Dorchester at 2 a.m. with 3 men who wanted to hurt her. Her mother. The thought hit her like a physical blow. If something happened to Emily tonight, who would take care of her mother? Who would make sure Sarah got to her treatments? Who would sit with her during the bad days when the chemo made everything hurt? Tears streamed down Emily's face as she listened to the men getting closer. Footsteps moving through her small space. Drawers being yanked open. Her few precious possessions being treated like garbage. Found the bathroom, doors locked. A fist pounded against the thin wood, making Emily jump so hard she nearly dropped her phone. Emily Grant. The voice was calm, almost pleasant, which somehow made it worse. We know you're in there. Open this door. We just want to have a conversation about your payment plan. Emily couldn't respond. Her voice had abandoned her completely. Fear had stolen every word. I said open the door. The pleasantness evaporated. You've got 5 seconds. Then we break it down, and things get a lot worse for you. 5. Emily's mind raced. She could scream. Maybe someone would hear. Maybe someone would call the police. But this was Dorchester at 2 a.m. People minded their own business. People didn't get involved. 4. She could try to fight, but she was 5'5" and maybe 130 pounds. These were grown men who clearly had experience with violence. 3. The card. The black business card that had been living in her wallet for 4 days. The number she'd stared at every night before, convincing herself she didn't need help. 2. Emily fumbled for her purse, which she'd grabbed from the nightstand when she ran. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unzip it. The wallet fell out. Cards scattered across the bathroom floor in the dim light from her phone screen. One. There. The black card with the gold embossed number. She grabbed it, typed the number into her phone with trembling fingers. Her mind went completely blank. What should she say? How did you ask a stranger to save your life? The bathroom door shuddered under the first impact. They were using something heavy. The frame cracked, wood splintering. Emily typed, "Help, 3 men, apartment." Her fingers hit the address, autocomplete filling in the rest. She pressed send and watched the message change from sending to delivered. The door shuddered again. More wood splintered near the lock. She could see fingers reaching through the gap now, trying to work the lock from inside. Her phone buzzed. One message. She looked down through tears. Don't make a sound. 4 minutes. 4 minutes. She had to survive for 4 minutes. Almost got it, one of the men said from the other side of the door. Cheap lock. Should have invested in better security, Emily. Another laugh. Another impact. The door frame was giving way. Emily could see more of the main room now through the widening gap. See the destruction they'd caused. Her couch cushions slashed open, stuffing everywhere. Her mother's favorite vase, the blue one her father had given Sarah on their 10th anniversary, shattered into pieces on the floor. That vase had survived her father's death, had survived moving 3 times, had been one of the few things Emily's mother had asked her to keep safe when she went into the hospital. And now, it was destroyed. The lock gave way with a final crack. The door swung open. 3 men filled the doorway, backlit by the harsh overhead light they'd turned on in her apartment. Emily recognized 2 of them from the cafe. The third was older, heavier, with eyes that looked dead, even while he smiled. "There you are," the older man said, stepping into the small bathroom. "Been looking for you, Miss Grant. Trying to avoid us? That's not very polite." Emily couldn't speak, couldn't move. She was pressed so hard against the wall that the cold tile hurt through her thin sleep shirt. "Let me explain how this works," he continued, crouching down so he was eye level with her. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sour. "You owe us money. A lot of money. You've been dodging our calls. You got your boyfriend to scare off our collectors. That was disrespectful. So now we're here to teach you about respect." "I don't have the money," Emily whispered. "I told you. I need more time." "Time's up. We've been patient. 6 months patient. But you made us look bad in front of that cafe full of people. You embarrassed us. So now the price has gone up. 50,000. 50? But you said 30? That was before. Now it's 50. Call it interest. Call it a penalty fee. Call it whatever you want. You've got until tomorrow night to get us $50,000, or we start taking payment in other ways." One of the younger men leaned against the doorframe. "Pretty girl like you. Lots of ways to work off a debt." Emily's stomach turned. The full horror of her situation crashed over her. These men weren't just going to hurt her. They were going to do much worse. And no one was coming to help. No one even knew she was in trouble, except, how long had it been? 3 minutes? 4? "Here's what's going to happen," the older man said, pulling out a lighter from his pocket. "You're going to call someone. Your mother, a friend, someone from that cafe. Someone who can get us $50,000 by tomorrow night. And while you make those calls, my associates are going to help you understand how serious we are about collecting." He flicked the lighter. The small flame danced in the darkness. "We'll start with something small. Maybe your hand. Maybe just a couple fingers. Enough to show we mean business, but not enough to prevent you from working. You need to be able to make us that money after all." The 2 younger men moved into the bathroom. One grabbed Emily's arm, hauling her to her feet. The other clamped a hand over her mouth when she tried to scream. They dragged her out of the bathroom into the destroyed main room of her studio apartment. Emily struggled, but it was useless. They were too strong, too practiced. This wasn't their first time doing something like this. "Hold her still," the older man instructed, approaching with the lighter. "And try not to damage anything permanent. We need her functional." That's when Emily heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Multiple. Moving fast. The 3 men heard it too. The one holding her arm loosened his grip slightly, head turning toward the door. "You expecting company?" the older man asked. Emily shook her head. She didn't trust herself to speak even if the hand wasn't covering her mouth. The footsteps got closer. Faster. More purposeful. Not the shuffling of a sleepy neighbor. These were tactical movements. Professional. And then her apartment door, already damaged from their forced entry earlier, exploded inward with such violence that it flew completely off its hinges. The crash was deafening in the small space. Wood and metal clattered across the floor. Men poured through the opening. Not 3. Not 5. At least a dozen, all dressed in black tactical gear, all carrying weapons that looked military grade. They moved with practiced efficiency, spreading through the tiny apartment in seconds, securing every corner, every angle. The 3 loan sharks released Emily immediately. The younger 2 raised their hands. The older one tried to maintain some authority, but Emily could see fear flickering in his dead eyes for the first time. And behind all the tactical team members, walking through the chaos with absolute calm, came Alexander Rossi. He wore the same clothes from earlier that day, though he'd lost the suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His dark eyes swept the room in one comprehensive glance, taking in everything. The destroyed furniture, the 3 men, Emily, held roughly by 2 men twice her size. Alexander's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The air itself felt heavier, harder to breathe. "Let her go." His voice was quiet, almost conversational. Somehow that made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. The men released Emily so quickly she stumbled. She caught herself on the arm of her destroyed couch, her legs shaking too badly to hold her weight properly. "This is a private business matter," the older man tried, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "The girl owes us money. We're just collecting what's owed, by breaking into her home in the middle of the night." Alexander took a single step forward. The tactical team members adjusted their positions automatically, creating a clear path while maintaining their coverage of the 3 intruders. "By threatening to burn her. By putting your hands on her. We operate within our rights as—" "You have no rights here." Alexander's voice remained quiet, but something in it made Emily's skin prickle. "Let me explain what's going to happen now. You're going to tell me who you work for. You're going to tell me who sent you. And then you're going to leave this city and never come back. We work for the Volkov organization," the older man said, trying to regain some ground. "You mess with us, you mess with them. They won't—" Alexander said something in Russian. Rapid, fluent, and based on the way all 3 men went pale, very threatening. "I just told them in their native language," Alexander said, switching back to English and looking at Emily for the first time, "that if they ever come near you again, I will personally deliver their heads to Dmitry Volkov as a gift." He turned his attention back to the 3 men. "Do you know what Dmitry will do when he receives that gift? He'll thank me, because Dmitry Volkov is not stupid enough to start a war with the Rossi family over a $15,000 loan to a waitress. He'll be grateful I cleaned up his mess before it became a bigger problem." Alexander pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "There. I just transferred $50,000 to an account Dmitry will recognize. More than enough to cover her original debt plus your inflated penalty fees. The loan is paid. The debt is settled. She's off your books. We can't just—" "You can. You will. And you'll leave now, before I change my mind about being generous." Alexander's eyes went cold. "I'm going to be very clear. Emily Grant is under my protection now. If I see any of you near her again, if I hear about any communication with her, if I even suspect you're thinking about her, we will have a very different conversation. One you will not survive. Do you understand?" Silence stretched. Not awkward, measured, long enough for the 3 men to absorb their situation. "We understand," the older man finally said. "Then leave. And tell Dmitry that Alexander Rossi sends his regards." They left, quickly and without another word, stepping over the broken door and disappearing down the hallway. Emily stood in the wreckage of her apartment, still shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Alexander's men moved through the space efficiently, checking rooms, securing the area. One of them approached Alexander and spoke too quietly for Emily to hear. Alexander nodded once. Then he crossed to her, and his entire demeanor changed. The cold authority vanished, replaced by something warmer. Concern. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. Did they harm you? Did they touch you? I'm okay, Emily managed, though her voice shook. They were going to, but you got here in time. 4 minutes. You said 4 minutes. I was close. Close enough that when your message came through, I was already 2 streets away. I've had someone watching your building since the incident at the cafe. He saw her expression. For your protection, not surveillance. I had a feeling they might escalate. One of his men appeared with a blanket, handing it to Alexander. He wrapped it around Emily's shoulders. She hadn't realized she was shivering until the warmth enveloped her. Emily, listen to me carefully. Alexander's hands remained on her shoulders, steadying her. You cannot stay here. Those men will report back to their organization. Even with the money I paid and the warning I gave, there might be others who don't get the message. You're not safe here. But this is my home, Emily whispered. Where am I supposed to go? With me. Just for tonight, he added quickly. Just until we're certain this is truly settled and you're safe. I have a secure location. You'll have privacy. In the morning, we'll figure out next steps. My mother. Panic flooded through Emily. She's at Boston General Hospital. What if they go after her? What if they try to hurt her to get to me? Alexander's hands tightened on her shoulders. Your mother is Sarah Grant, currently receiving treatment for breast cancer at Boston General, correct? How do you know that? I make it my business to know about people I care about protecting. Your mother will be safe. I'll have security placed at her hospital room immediately. Discreet but effective. No one will get near her. But you need to come with me now. Can you trust me to keep you both safe? Emily looked into his dark brown eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. This man, this dangerous man she barely knew, had just paid $50,000 to save her life, had brought what looked like a private army to rescue her, and was now offering to protect her mother. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. Why are you doing all this for me? Alexander's expression softened. Because you asked for help. Because no one deserves what those men were going to do to you. Because I couldn't stand by and do nothing. He paused. Is that reason enough for now? It wasn't. It didn't explain anything. But Emily was too scared. Too exhausted. Too overwhelmed to push for more. She nodded. Good. My men will collect your important belongings. Tell us what you need. The painting by the window. It was my father's. And the photo albums in my closet. And my mother's jewelry box. You heard her, Alexander said to his team. They moved immediately, carefully gathering the items while others documented the scene with photos. 10 minutes later, Emily was being guided down the stairs, Alexander's hand steady at the small of her back. His presence was the only thing keeping her upright. When they emerged onto the street, Emily saw 5 black SUVs lined up, blocking the entire street. Neighbors had gathered at windows but stayed inside. Nobody wanted any part of this. Alexander opened the rear door of the middle SUV himself, helped Emily inside. The interior was luxurious. Leather seats, perfect climate control. Even the air smelled expensive. He slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, secure sound. Through tinted windows, Emily watched her building, her home for 3 years, recede as they pulled away. Where are we going? She asked quietly. Somewhere safe, somewhere you can rest without fear. Alexander's voice was gentle. I promise you, Emily. You're safe now. Emily leaned back against the seat, exhaustion crashing over her. Her eyes drifted closed. The last thing she felt before sleep claimed her was warmth being draped over her. Alexander's suit jacket settling over the blanket. Take us home, she heard him say softly. And call ahead. Tell Teresa we have a guest who needs care. Home. Emily didn't have one of those anymore. But as consciousness faded, she thought maybe that would be okay, at least for tonight. Sunlight filtered through curtains the color of champagne, soft and golden, and completely unfamiliar. Emily's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding her thoughts before memory rushed back in a flood. The break-in. The men. Alexander arriving with armed soldiers, the drive through dark streets. She sat up quickly, taking in her surroundings. The room was beautiful in an understated way. Cream walls, elegant furniture that looked antique but carefully maintained. A window seat overlooking what appeared to be a private garden below. Her father's painting hung on the wall across from the bed, perfectly mounted as if it had always belonged there. Her mother's jewelry box sat on the dresser beside framed photographs from her apartment. Someone had unpacked her life with care. Emily wore the same clothes from last night, wrinkled and smelling faintly of fear. On the chair beside the bed lay fresh clothing, gray pants and a coral blouse, both still bearing tags, both looking exactly her size. Before she could process any of this, a soft knock sounded at the door. "Miss Grant?" A woman's voice, older and warm. "Are you awake? May I come in?" "Yes," Emily managed, her throat dry as sand. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore simple but quality clothes and carried a genuine smile. In her hands was a tray with water, orange juice, and toast. "Good morning. I'm Teresa. I manage Mr. Rossi's household." She set the tray on the bedside table. "I thought you might be thirsty when you woke. How are you feeling?" "I don't know," Emily answered honestly. "Confused. Scared." "Where am I exactly?" "Mr. Rossi's private residence in Beacon Hill. You're completely safe here, I promise. This building has excellent security." Teresa poured water into a crystal glass and handed it to Emily. "Drink, dear. You look like you need it." Emily drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. When she finished, panic hit her like a physical blow. "My mother. She's at Boston General Hospital. Is she safe? Did those men—" "Your mother is perfectly safe," Teresa said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Better than safe, actually. Mr. Rossi had her transferred early this morning to Massachusetts General Hospital. Much better facilities. She has a private room now, and a private oncologist overseeing her care. Dr. Catherine Wells, one of the best in the city. All expenses are covered, and there's a nurse with her around the clock." Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. "He did that already? It's only been a few hours. Mr. Rossi is very efficient when he decides to help someone. Your mother is comfortable. Her treatment continues without any interruption, and she's been told that her insurance finally approved the upgrade. She doesn't need to worry about anything except getting better." The tears spilled over. Emily couldn't stop them. 6 months of carrying impossible weight. 6 months of drowning slowly. 6 months of being so scared and alone. And suddenly someone had lifted it all. Relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion crashed through her chest. Teresa produced a tissue and patted Emily's shoulder with maternal comfort. "There now. It's all right to cry, sweetheart. You've been through quite an ordeal. Let it out." Emily cried for several minutes while Teresa sat beside her, one hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. When the tears finally slowed, Emily wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like this. You have nothing to apologize for. You were attacked in your home. Anyone would be shaken." Teresa stood and gestured to the clothes. "Why don't you take a shower and change into something fresh? The bathroom is through that door. Take your time. When you're ready, Mr. Rossi would like to speak with you. He's been waiting since dawn to make sure you're all right." The bathroom was as luxurious as the bedroom. Marble surfaces, a shower large enough for 3 people, towels so thick and soft they felt like clouds. Emily stood under hot water for a long time, letting it wash away the fear and grime of the previous night. The clothes fit perfectly. The coral blouse was a color she never would have chosen for herself, but somehow looked right against her skin. She dried her hair, pulled it into a simple ponytail, and studied her reflection. She looked different, changed somehow by everything that had happened. When she emerged, Teresa was waiting in the hallway with another warm smile. "Much better. Come, I'll take you to Mr. Rossi." The apartment was enormous, not gaudy, but spacious in a way that spoke of serious wealth. High ceilings, hardwood floors, artwork that looked original. They passed a formal dining room, a study lined with books, a kitchen that would make any chef weep. Finally, Teresa led her to a large living space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Alexander stood by those windows, dressed casually in dark jeans and a white button-down with rolled sleeves. His hair was slightly damp. When he turned at their approach, Emily saw dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept. "Emily," he said her name with visible relief. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Thank you for the clothes and for my mother." Her voice cracked. "Teresa told me what you did. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. I'm glad you're safe. Would you like coffee? Breakfast?" "Coffee would be wonderful." "I'll bring a fresh pot," Teresa said, disappearing toward the kitchen. Alexander gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. I imagine you have questions." Emily settled onto the cream-colored sofa, hands folded tightly in her lap. Alexander took a chair across from her, maintaining respectful distance. "I have a lot of questions," Emily admitted. "What happens now? Those men last night, the Russians you mentioned. Are they really going to leave me alone?" Alexander's expression grew serious. "The men from last night, the local collectors, will not bother you again. However, the larger organization they work for is more complicated." "What organization?" "Bratva. Russian organized crime. They've been expanding operations in Boston for the past few years. One of their strategies is predatory lending. They target desperate people who can't get legitimate loans. They offer money with impossible terms, knowing borrowers can never pay it back. Then they use that debt as leverage." Emily's stomach turned. "Leverage for what?" "Information, access, sometimes labor. They turn desperate people into assets. A waitress at a popular cafe, for instance, might overhear useful conversations, might see who meets with whom, might be able to slip something into someone's drink. They don't recruit you immediately. They build your debt slowly, increase the pressure, until you're so desperate, you'll do anything they ask." "They were going to make me hurt people?" Emily felt sick. "Eventually, yes. The 3 men who broke into your apartment were accelerating the timeline because I'd interfered at the cafe. They wanted to establish control before I could complicate things further. I just wanted to help my mother. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. You were desperate and trying to save someone you love. They prey on exactly that vulnerability." Alexander leaned forward. "Emily, the local collectors have been dealt with. The money I transferred bought you breathing room. But the Russian organization is still active in Boston. They know you're connected to me now, which complicates things." "What does that mean?" "It means you can't return to your normal routine yet. Not until we're certain they've backed off completely. I've already contacted the Morning Brew. They've been told you're on family medical leave due to your mother's condition. Your position is protected." Emily absorbed this information slowly. "For how long?" "A few weeks, perhaps. Maybe less if negotiations go well. I understand this isn't ideal, but your safety has to come first." Teresa returned with coffee, cream and sugar. Emily prepared her cup with shaking hands, grateful for something familiar to focus on. "Why are you doing all this?" Emily asked quietly. "You barely know me." Alexander was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I've been coming to that cafe for 6 months. Same time every morning." "Do you know why?" "For the coffee?" A hint of a smile. "The coffee is mediocre at best." "I came because of you, Emily. I've been watching you for months. The way you work, double shifts without complaining. The way you're kind to difficult customers even when you're exhausted. I saw your courage and your strength. When you asked for help last night, I couldn't ignore it." Emily's heart beat faster. "You're saying you have feelings for me? I'm saying I respect you. I'm saying that watching you struggle against impossible odds made me want to help. When those men threatened you, something in me decided you were under my protection. Whether you'd asked for it or not, that's not how this works. You can't just decide people are yours to protect." "Poor choice of words," Alexander conceded. "You're not property. You're a person who needed help, who I chose to help, who I will continue to help until you're safe." They sat in silence, drinking coffee while Emily tried to process everything. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, for a few weeks, until it's safe, but I need to see my mother every day." "That's not negotiable." "Of course. I'll arrange transportation with security. Discreet, so she doesn't worry." Over the next week, a routine established itself. Each morning, Emily woke in the luxurious guest room to find Teresa had left fresh coffee and breakfast outside her door. She'd shower, dress and clothes that appeared in her closet as if by magic, all in her size, and surprisingly suited to her taste. By 9, a black car would be waiting to take her to Massachusetts General Hospital. The security was present but subtle. Just a driver who stayed with the car, occasionally another man who positioned himself in the hospital lobby. Emily visited her mother for hours each day, sitting beside her during treatments, reading to her, holding her hand. Sarah looked better already. The private room was bright and cheerful. Dr. Wells was attentive and optimistic. The nurses were kind. Emily's mother asked questions about the sudden upgrade, but Emily stuck to the story about insurance finally approving everything. She didn't mention Alexander, didn't mention the attack, didn't mention anything that would worry her mother when she needed to focus on healing. In the afternoons, Emily returned to Alexander's apartment. Teresa would have lunch prepared. Simple, delicious meals that they often ate together in the kitchen while Teresa worked. The older woman had a gift for gentle conversation, never prying but always ready to listen. Emily found herself opening up about her father's death, about moving to Boston with dreams of culinary school, about how cancer had derailed everything. "You're a good daughter," Teresa said one afternoon while teaching Emily how to make proper Italian tomato sauce. "Your mother is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. She raised me alone after my dad died, worked 2 jobs to give me opportunities. This is the least I can do. Still, not every child would sacrifice their dreams for a parent. They weren't just dreams. She was dying. I'd sacrifice anything for her." Teresa patted her hand. "I know, dear. And now someone is helping you both. Let yourself accept that gift." Alexander was often present, but never intrusive. He worked from his home office, taking calls in Italian and English, and sometimes Russian. Emily would see him on the terrace late at night, phone pressed to his ear, cigarette smoke curling into the darkness. He always asked about her mother, always made sure Emily had everything she needed, but he kept careful distance, as if aware that she was still processing everything. On the 4th day, Emily ventured into the kitchen late at night, unable to sleep. She found Alexander there, sitting at the island with a glass of whiskey and his laptop. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to disturb you. You're not disturbing me. Can't sleep?" "Too much on my mind." Emily moved to the refrigerator, found bottled water. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. That morning at the cafe, when those men came, you could have just scared them off. Why did you give me your number?" Alexander closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "Because I knew they'd come back. Because I knew you were in over your head and too proud to ask for help. I wanted you to have an option when things got worse. You knew they'd escalate. I know how organizations like the Bratva operate. They don't give up on assets easily. I suspected they'd try something dramatic." He paused. "I'm glad you used the number. I'm glad you texted me. I almost didn't. I almost tried to handle it myself. I know. You're stubborn and independent and convinced you have to save everyone alone. But Emily, sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's survival." She sat down across from him at the island. "I'm not used to this. People doing things for me, not expecting anything in return. I told you, I don't expect anything. Everyone expects something eventually." Alexander met her eyes directly. "Then I'll tell you what I expect. I expect you to visit your mother without fear. I expect you to rest and recover from your trauma. I expect you to let yourself be safe for the first time in months. That's all." Emily wanted to believe him. But trust didn't come easily, not after everything she'd been through. Over the following days, the routine continued. Hospital visits, meals with Teresa, quiet evenings reading in the guest room, or sitting on the terrace watching the city lights. Alexander maintained his respectful distance, but Emily noticed small things. The way his eyes followed her when she entered a room. The way he tensed when his phone rang, as if constantly alert for threats. The way he asked about her mother with genuine interest, not just politeness. On the 10th day, Emily found him in his study, surrounded by papers and looking frustrated. "Everything okay?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, some of the tension leaving his face. "Just business complications. Nothing that concerns you. How was your visit today?" "Good. Mom's responding really well to the treatment. Dr. Wells is optimistic. Emily hesitated. May I come in? Of course. She sat in the chair across from his desk. I wanted to say thank you. Properly. For everything you've done. My mother is getting better because of you. I'm safe because of you. I know I can't repay any of this. But I'm grateful. You don't need to repay it, Emily. Seeing your mother improve is payment enough. Why? The question had been burning in her for days. Why do you care so much about someone you barely know? Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her. Because 6 months ago, I walked into a cafe looking for decent coffee. And I saw you. Not just physically, though you're beautiful. I saw how you treated an elderly customer who couldn't decide what to order. Patient, kind, taking time even though there was a line. I saw how you slipped an extra pastry into a college student's bag when you thought no one was watching. I saw you, Emily. The real you. And I kept coming back because I wanted to see more. Emily's heart pounded. That's not a reason to risk your life for someone. Maybe not. But when you're in my position, when you spend your days dealing with violence and betrayal, and people who only want things from you, meeting someone genuine is rare, worth protecting. They sat in silence for a moment, something unspoken building between them. The cafe, Emily said finally. Can I go back soon? Soon. We're still working out arrangements with the Russian organization. But soon, I promise. Emily nodded and stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Alexander, thank you for seeing me. Not many people do. I know, he said softly. That's what made you worth seeing. As Emily returned to her room that night, she realized something had shifted. This gilded cage was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. And the dangerous man who'd saved her life was starting to feel less like a stranger and more like someone she could trust. It terrified her, but not enough to want to leave. 10 days after the attack, Emily woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows and the now familiar sound of Teresa humming in the kitchen. The routine had become comfortable, almost normal, which was exactly what made her nervous. She dressed in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, both mysteriously perfect for her size and taste, and found Teresa preparing breakfast. Good morning, dear. Mr. Rossi asked if you'd like company for your hospital visit today. He'd like to meet your mother properly if you're comfortable with that. Emily's stomach flipped. She'd been avoiding this conversation with her mother for days, deflecting questions about the sudden improvements with vague answers about insurance corrections. But Sarah Grant was sharp, even weakened by treatment. She knew something didn't add up. Yes, Emily said finally. That's probably a good idea. She has questions I can't keep avoiding. An hour later, they pulled up to Massachusetts General Hospital in one of Alexander's discreet black sedans. He wore a simple navy suit, no tie, looking less intimidating than usual, but still unmistakably powerful. As they walked through the hospital corridors, Emily noticed staff members recognizing him, nodding with respect that bordered on deference. You've been here before, Emily observed. I donate to several hospital programs, cancer research specifically. His voice carried something heavy. My mother died of ovarian cancer when I was 16. Emily stopped walking. Alexander, I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? It was a long time ago. He gestured toward the elevator. Your mother's room is on the 7th floor, correct? Sarah Grant's private room was bright and cheerful, filled with flowers and morning light. She sat propped up in bed, looking thinner than Emily remembered, but with better color in her cheeks. Her gray hair had been brushed, and she wore her favorite blue robe. Emily, Sarah smiled. Then her eyes moved to Alexander, and the smile faltered slightly. And you brought a friend. Mom, this is Alexander Rossi. He's the one who helped arrange your transfer here. Alexander, this is my mother, Sarah Grant. Alexander crossed to the bed, his entire demeanor softening. Mrs. Grant, it's an honor to meet you. Your daughter speaks of you constantly. Sarah studied him with the careful attention of a mother who'd spent 26 years protecting her daughter. Mr. Rossi, I recognize your name. Your family has quite a reputation in Boston. We do, Alexander acknowledged without defensiveness. Much of it deserved. And yet my daughter is staying with you? My daughter who came home from work one day and suddenly everything changed? Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Emily, I know you've been lying to me. Insurance companies don't just suddenly approve everything. So why don't you tell me what's really happening? Emily sat on the edge of her mother's bed, taking her hand. I got into trouble, financial trouble. I borrowed money from the wrong people to pay for your treatment. They came after me. Alexander helped. Helped how? He paid the debt. He protected me when they tried to hurt me. He moved you here so you'd be safe and have better care. Emily's voice cracked. I'm sorry I lied, Mom. I didn't want you to worry. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Emily. Baby, what did you do? What I had to. You were dying. The treatment you needed wasn't covered. I couldn't just watch you die. So you put yourself in danger for me? I'd do it again. 1,000 times. Sarah looked at Alexander, who stood quietly a few feet away, giving them space. And you? Why would you help my daughter? What do you want from her? Nothing, Alexander said simply. She needed help. I provided it. That's all. Men like you don't do things for nothing. I may be sick, Mr. Rossi, but I'm not naive. My late husband had dealings with people in your world years ago. Brief dealings, but enough for me to understand how it works. So I'll ask again. What do you want from my daughter? Alexander moved closer, his expression serious. Mrs. Grant, your husband's name was Robert Grant. He worked as an accountant for the Moretti family for approximately 8 months in 1995. He left that employment when you became pregnant and never looked back. He was a good man who made one mistake and spent the rest of his life making up for it. Sarah's face went pale. How do you know that? I know many things, including that your daughter inherited his sense of loyalty and his stubbornness. Alexander met Sarah's eyes directly. I don't want anything from Emily except to ensure she's safe. The people she borrowed from are dangerous, and they won't easily forget. I'm protecting her because I have the means to do so, and because watching her suffer is not something I can tolerate. Why? Sarah pressed. Why do you care about a waitress you barely know? Because she's not just a waitress. She's brilliant and brave and has spent 6 months working herself to exhaustion for you. Because she deserved better than to be preyed upon by criminals. Because I could help. So I did. Sarah held his gaze for a long moment, reading something there that Emily couldn't see. Finally, she nodded. Promise me something, Mr. Rossi. Promise me you'll protect her. Really protect her. Not just from the people she borrowed from, but from your world, too. She's all I have. I promise, Alexander said solemnly. On my mother's memory, I will keep her safe. The weight of that promise hung in the air. Sarah seemed to relax slightly, some tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. The medical care, the protection. I can't repay you. You don't need to. Focus on getting better. That's payment enough. They visited for another hour, Sarah asking questions about Emily's routine, making sure her daughter was eating properly and sleeping enough. Alexander answered when appropriate, his manner respectful and surprisingly gentle. By the time they left, Emily could see her mother's approval. Cautious but real. In the car, Emily was quiet, processing everything that had been revealed. You investigated my father, she said finally. I investigate everyone I become involved with. It's not personal, just practical. What else do you know about him? That he died in a car accident when you were 12. That he left you and your mother with minimal life insurance and a mortgage. That your mother worked as a nurse and a weekend receptionist to keep you both afloat. That you were a straight-A student who gave up a scholarship to culinary school to help with bills. Alexander glanced at her. I know your whole story, Emily. All the sacrifices you've made. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being truly seen for the first time. Where are we going? Emily asked, noticing they weren't heading back to Beacon Hill. Dinner, if you're comfortable with that. I'd like to take you somewhere nice. Somewhere we can talk without Teresa hovering. Teresa doesn't hover. Teresa absolutely hovers. She likes you. The restaurant was small, tucked into a side street in the North End. The kind of place tourists would never find. When they entered, The owner greeted Alexander in rapid Italian, embracing him like family. The entire restaurant was empty, except for one table set by the window. "You closed the whole place?" Emily asked as they were seated. "I value privacy, and I wanted to talk to you without interruptions." Wine appeared, followed by appetizers Emily hadn't ordered. Fresh burrata with tomatoes, grilled octopus, crispy arancini. Alexander ordered for them both in Italian, and the owner nodded approvingly. "Tell me about nursing," Alexander said once they were alone. "Teresa mentioned you wanted to study it before everything happened with your mother." Emily was surprised he remembered. "It was a long time ago. Different life. But you still think about it." "Sometimes. I liked the idea of helping people, making a real difference. But culinary school was more affordable, and I was good at cooking. So that's what I pursued. Then even that became impossible." "What if it wasn't impossible anymore? What if you could go back to school after your mother recovers?" "Alexander, I can't ask you for more than you've already given. I'm not offering. I'm asking what you'd want if circumstances were different. If money weren't an issue. If you could do anything, what would you choose?" Emily considered the question seriously. "Nursing. Specifically oncology nursing. After watching what my mom's been through, seeing how much difference a good nurse makes. I'd want to be that person for other families. That's a good dream. Worth pursuing." They talked through multiple courses, conversation flowing easier than it ever had. Alexander told her about growing up in his family, the weight of expectations and responsibilities he'd never asked for. How he'd wanted to study architecture but was groomed from birth to take over his father's empire. "Do you regret it?" Emily asked. "Taking over?" "Sometimes. But it's my responsibility now. My family, my people, they depend on me. I can't walk away from that, even though it's a life of constant danger." "Even though." He paused, studying her. "Does that frighten you? Knowing what I am, what I do?" "Yes," Emily admitted. "But it also saved my life. So I'm trying to reconcile those two things." Their main courses arrived. The food was exquisite, each bite better than the last. Emily found herself relaxing, laughing at Alexander's stories about Teresa's matchmaking attempts with various unsuitable women over the years. "She approves of you," Alexander said. "That's rare. Teresa has very high standards. I like her too. She's been kind to me. She reminds me of my mother. Same warmth, same ability to see through lies. My mother would have liked you." The intimacy of that statement hung between them. Emily felt something shifting in her chest, walls she'd carefully maintained beginning to crack. Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then set it face down. It buzzed again immediately. And again. "I'm sorry," he said, irritation clear in his voice. "I need to take this. One moment." He stepped away from the table, phone pressed to his ear. Emily watched his expression change. Concern. Then anger. His jaw tightened, and he spoke in rapid Italian, his tone sharp with authority. When he returned to the table, the warmth from earlier had been replaced with cold focus. "We need to go. Now." "What happened?" "Your friend Kayla from the cafe. The Russians went after her. They interrogated her this afternoon trying to find out where you are." Emily's stomach dropped. "Is she hurt?" "No. One of my people was watching the cafe and intervened. But this is my fault. I should have placed protection on her immediately. I got complacent, distracted." He pulled out his wallet, left several $100 bills on the table. "Come. We're going back to the apartment, and I'm arranging security for your friend." In the car, Emily couldn't stop shaking. "This is because of me. They hurt her because of me. They didn't hurt her. My people stopped it before that could happen. But you're right that she's in danger because of her association with you." Alexander was already on his phone, issuing rapid orders. "I want 24-hour protection on Kayla Morrison. Discreet but constant. And find out who gave the order to approach her. I want names. I need to call her. I need to make sure she's okay." "Not yet. Let me secure the situation first. Then you can call her. I promise." Back at the apartment, Alexander disappeared into his office, while Emily paced the living room. Teresa appeared with tea that Emily couldn't drink. Her best friend had been threatened because Emily had gotten involved with dangerous people, because she'd asked Alexander for help, because everything she touched turned to disaster. An hour later, Alexander emerged. Kayla is at her apartment with 2 of my best men stationed nearby. She's shaken but physically fine. The Russians asked about you. She said she didn't know anything. They left when my people arrived. She doesn't know who they were, or that they're connected to your situation. I need to talk to her. Tomorrow. Tonight, she thinks some random men harassed her, and security from the building scared them off. Let her process that. Tomorrow you can call and check on her. But Emily, she's safe now. I've made that very clear to the Bratva. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Emily sank onto the couch, guilt crushing her chest. Everyone around me gets hurt. My mother almost died. Kayla got threatened. How many more people are going to suffer because I'm in your life? Alexander sat beside her, not touching, but close. This isn't your fault. You didn't create this situation. Predatory criminals did, and I chose to involve myself. Any consequences are mine to handle. But Kayla is protected now. Will remain protected until this is completely resolved. I won't let anything happen to her. Emily looked at him, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes for the first time. The weight he carried constantly, the vigilance that never stopped. He'd been protecting her for nearly 2 weeks, managing his business and her safety, and now Kayla's safety simultaneously. And still, he blamed himself for not doing more. You can't protect everyone all the time, she said softly. You're not superhuman, Alexander. Even you need rest. Rest is a luxury I can't afford right now. They sat in silence for several minutes. Then Emily stood. I'm going to bed. Thank you for dinner, and for protecting Kayla. I know I keep saying thank you, but I don't know what else to say. You don't need to say anything. Emily went to her room but couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Kayla, about her mother, about Alexander, and the impossible situation they were all trapped in. Around 3 a.m, she gave up and wrapped herself in a robe, padding quietly through the dark apartment. She found Alexander on the terrace. He stood at the railing, a glass of scotch in one hand, cigarette in the other, staring out at the glittering city below. He'd changed into jeans and a dark shirt, and the city lights cast shadows across his face. Can't sleep either? He asked without turning. Too much in my head. Emily joined him at the railing, maintaining a careful distance. Do you ever stop? The constant vigilance, the protection, the managing of threats? No. That's the job. The second I stop paying attention, someone gets hurt. Like tonight with Kayla. He took a drag from his cigarette. I should have anticipated they'd go after people connected to you. I got distracted by your mother's improvement and by enjoying your company. That was careless. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to have moments that aren't about threat assessment and protection. Not in my position. Being human gets people killed. Emily studied his profile, seeing the loneliness there for the first time, the isolation of carrying so much weight alone. That sounds exhausting. It is. He finished his scotch, set the glass on the railing. But it's also my life. Has been since I was 22. I don't know how to be anything else. They stood in silence, the city humming below them. Emily felt something shifting between them, some barrier lowering. They were 2 people trapped in circumstances neither had chosen, trying to survive in the only ways they knew how. Thank you, Emily said quietly. For everything. I know I keep saying it, but you've given me back my life. My mother's life. That's not something I can ever truly repay. I told you. I don't want repayment. Alexander finally looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. I just want you safe. That's all I've ever wanted. The weight of his words settled between them. Emily knew she should go back inside, put distance between them, protect herself from getting more tangled in this dangerous man's world. But she didn't move. Neither did he. They stood together on that terrace until dawn began to lighten the sky. 2 people bound by circumstances and choices, and something neither was ready to name yet, connected by trauma and gratitude, and the tentative beginning of trust. 2 weeks had passed since Emily first arrived at Alexander's Beacon Hill residence. The guest room no longer felt temporary. Her belongings had found homes in drawers and on shelves. The morning routine with Teresa had become comfortable, and her mother's health continued improving, Dr. Wells growing more optimistic with each passing day. Sarah's chemotherapy cycle would end in 3 weeks, and the scans showed remarkable progress. But something else was changing too. Something Emily had been trying very hard to ignore. The tension between her and Alexander had shifted from careful politeness to something electric, something dangerous in its own way. It started small, his hand brushing hers when he passed her coffee, her fingers lingering on his arm when he showed her something on his laptop, the way their eyes would meet across the room and hold just a beat too long. There were almost kisses, moments when they'd find themselves too close, breath-catching, leaning in before one of them pulled away. Usually Alexander, maintaining that respectful distance he'd held since the beginning. But Emily saw the way his jaw tightened with restraint, saw the heat in his dark eyes before he'd step back and excuse himself. It was driving her slowly insane. Teresa noticed, of course. The older woman noticed everything. She'd taken to leaving them alone more often, finding reasons to run errands or visit family across town, creating opportunities Emily wasn't sure she was ready for. One afternoon, Emily discovered art supplies in the study. Professional-grade oils, canvases, brushes still in their packaging. She found Alexander reading in the living room. "Did you buy these?" she asked, holding up a sable brush that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. "Teresa mentioned you liked to paint. Before everything happened with your mother, I thought you might want to start again. Alexander, this is too much. These supplies are expensive. So paint something expensive with them." He smiled. "You're living in my home with nothing to do while I work. I thought you might enjoy having a creative outlet." Emily wanted to argue, but the truth was, she'd missed painting desperately. Missed the meditative focus of mixing colors, building layers, losing herself in creation. She hadn't had time or money for art in over 2 years. "Thank you," she said finally. "This is incredibly thoughtful." She set up in the study, using the large desk by the window for workspace. The first few attempts were rusty, her hand remembering techniques her mind had half forgotten. But by the 3rd day, she found her rhythm again. She painted Boston at dawn, the city she saw from Alexander's terrace each morning, the gold and pink light, the buildings emerging from darkness. Alexander began spending time in the study while she worked, sitting in his chair with his laptop or papers, conducting business in Italian or English while she painted. She was acutely aware of him watching her sometimes, studying her with an intensity that made her skin flush hot. But it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, his presence helped her focus, grounded her. "You're talented," he said one evening after she'd finished a particularly complex section of sky. "Really talented. This should be in a gallery." "It's just a hobby. It's more than that." "This is art, Emily. You have a gift." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She was still cleaning brushes when his phone rang, the tone sharp and urgent. Alexander answered in Italian, his expression darkening with each passing second. He stood abruptly, switching to rapid-fire commands that Emily couldn't follow. When he ended the call, tension radiated from every line of his body. "What happened?" Emily asked. "Coordinated attack on 3 of my properties, warehouses in Southie. This wasn't random, it was planned. I need to handle this personally." He was already moving, pulling on his suit jacket, checking something on his phone. "You'll stay here with security. 6 men will be stationed around the apartment. Don't open the door for anyone except Teresa. Understand? How long will you be gone?" "I don't know. However long it takes." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Emily, stay inside. Don't go anywhere. Promise me." "I promise. Be careful." Something flickered in his eyes. Then he was gone, the door closing with finality behind him. The apartment felt different without Alexander. Larger, emptier. Emily tried to paint but couldn't focus. She tried reading, watching television, anything to pass the time. The 6 security men were discreet but present, their positions around the building obvious to her, now that she knew to look for them. Hours crawled by. 6 became 9, became 12. Emily called the hospital to check on her mother, who was sleeping comfortably according to the night nurse. She picked at the dinner Teresa had left before going home for the evening. She paced the living room, watching the city lights, and trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. At 8 in the evening, Emily was in the study attempting to work on her painting when the phone on Alexander's desk rang. His landline, which she'd never heard ring before. She stared at it, uncertain if she should answer. It rang 4 times, then stopped. Then started again immediately. On the 3rd ring, Emily picked up. "Hello?" A man's voice speaking rapid Italian. She caught maybe 1 word in 5 from the semester of Italian she'd taken in college. But certain words stood out. Rossi, location, and what sounded like an address in Beacon Hill. Emily's blood ran cold. Someone was discussing Alexander's home address. Someone was talking about her location. She grabbed a pen and notebook, scribbling down what she could understand, numbers that might be an address. A time, maybe 10 o'clock, and one phrase she recognized from cooking shows. La sorpresa, the surprise. The man seemed to realize no one was responding. He said something sharp, questioning. Emily quietly set the phone down without hanging up and backed away from the desk. There was a traitor. Someone with access to Alexander's private line. Someone who knew she was here. Someone passing information to enemies. She needed to tell Alexander. But his phone had been going straight to voicemail for hours, probably turned off or destroyed during whatever was happening at the warehouses. She called his main number again. Still nothing. Emily spent the next several hours going through everything she could remember. The voice on the phone had been familiar somehow, like she'd heard it in the background of Alexander's conversations before. She wrote down every detail she could recall, trying to piece together what it meant. At 3 in the morning, she heard the front door open. Emily rushed out of the study to find Alexander returning, surrounded by 2 of his men. His shirt was torn. Blood stained his left sleeve. But he was walking, talking, giving orders to his team. "Alexander," Emily breathed, relief flooding through her. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. Superficial." He noticed her expression, the notebook clutched in her hands. "What's wrong? Did something happen here?" "Someone called your landline. Spoke in Italian. I only understood some of it. But Alexander, they were discussing this address. And a time. And they mentioned surprise." She handed him the notebook with her hurried notes. "I think there's a traitor. Someone with access to your private information." Alexander went very still, reading what she'd written. His jaw tightened dangerously. "You're sure about this? The exact words?" "As sure as I can be with my limited Italian. But yes, I'm certain they were discussing your home and my location here." He looked at her with something like awe. "This is excellent work, Emily. Detailed. Specific." He pulled out his phone, making a call despite the late hour. Spoke in Italian to whoever answered, referencing Emily's notes. Then he turned back to her. "We need to identify who made that call. That means going through phone records, cross-referencing access to this number. Are you willing to help me? It could take hours. Of course. If there's someone betraying you, we need to find them." They worked through the night in Alexander's office. He pulled up records on his computer, going through lists of people who had access to his private lines. Emily sat beside him, looking at names and numbers, trying to remember if any matched the voice she'd heard. They cross-referenced times and locations, building a picture of who could have made the call. The proximity was intense. Their chairs pulled close together to share the computer screen, their arms brushing as they reached for papers. The scent of him, cologne mixed with smoke and something uniquely Alexander, filling her senses. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every glance held weight. Around 5 in the morning, they narrowed it down to 3 possible suspects. All had access to Alexander's private numbers. All had been in the office recently. One was a distant cousin, Joseph Ferraro, who handled some of the family's legitimate business interests. "Joseph," Alexander said, his voice cold. "He's had gambling debts. I helped him pay them off 6 months ago. But if he fell back into that habit..." He pulled up more records. "Look at this. His phone was near this building yesterday. And he made a call to a Russian number 2 days ago. You think he's selling information to the Bratva? I think it's very possible." Alexander leaned back, rubbing his face with exhaustion. The blood on his sleeve had dried, and Emily noticed his hands were scraped too. This is my fault. I trusted family without verifying loyalty. That's a mistake that could have gotten you killed. But it didn't. We caught it. Emily touched his arm, just above where the blood stained his shirt. Let me look at that wound. You said it was superficial, but you should let me clean it properly. Emily, I'm fine. Alexander, please. Let me help you for once instead of always being the one who needs help. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Bathroom down the hall has a first aid kit. In the guest bathroom, Emily carefully cut away his sleeve to reveal a long but shallow cut along his bicep. Nothing that needed stitches, but deep enough to have bled significantly. She cleaned it with antiseptic while Alexander sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching her work. You're good at this, he observed. Steady hands. I wanted to be a nurse, remember? I know basic wound care. She applied antibiotic ointment, her fingers gentle on his skin. How did this happen? Knife. One of the attackers got closer than he should have. I was distracted thinking about you here alone and made a mistake. You got hurt thinking about me? I get hurt when I'm not fully focused. Tonight, I wasn't fully focused because part of my mind was here with you. His hand caught hers as she reached for gauze. Emily, I need to tell you something. These past 2 weeks, having you here, watching you paint, talking with you over dinner, it's been the most peace I've felt in years, but it's also been torture. Why torture? Because I want you. I've wanted you since the first day I walked into that cafe and saw you, but you're here under my protection. You're vulnerable and dependent on me for safety. Acting on what I feel would be taking advantage of that, so I've been trying very hard to maintain distance, to be respectful. Emily's heart pounded. What if I don't want distance? Emily. His voice was strained. You don't know what you're saying. You're grateful and confused and... She kissed him, cut off his words with her mouth on his, her hands framing his face. Every ounce of 2 weeks of tension poured into that contact. For a heartbeat, Alexander froze. Then he responded with matching intensity, one hand sliding into her hair, the other pulling her closer. The kiss was desperate, almost rough, weeks of restraint shattering completely. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. We shouldn't do this. You deserve normal. You deserve safe. You deserve someone who isn't constantly surrounded by violence and danger. Stop telling me what I deserve. Let me decide what I want. Emily pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I want you, Alexander. Not because you saved me, or because I'm grateful. Because these past 2 weeks, I've seen who you are. The real you. And I want that person. I can't give you a normal life. I don't want a normal life. I want this life. With you. If you want me to. Instead of answering with words, Alexander kissed her again. Slower this time, but no less intense. He stood, pulling her with him, careful of his injured arm. They made it as far as his bedroom, a space Emily had never entered before, large and masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive bed that they barely made it to. Everything that had been building between them for weeks finally found release. Alexander was gentle despite the desperation, constantly checking that she was okay, that she wanted this. Emily answered with touches and kisses, with whispered assurances that yes, she wanted exactly this. Wanted him. Afterward, they lay tangled together as dawn light began filtering through the windows. Emily traced patterns on Alexander's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. His fingers drew lazy circles on her shoulder. I should feel guilty, she murmured. But I don't. Good. Don't. He kissed the top of her head. This changes things between us. You know that. I know. Is that okay? It's more than okay. He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. Emily, I need you to understand something. In my world, when I claim something as mine, I protect it absolutely. If we do this, if we become this, you're mine. Fully. And I don't share. I don't let go. That's who I am. I know who you are. I'm choosing you anyway. Relief and something deeper crossed his face. Then we do this right. We identify the traitor. We eliminate the threat. And then we figure out what comes next. Together. Together, Emily agreed. They stayed in bed as the sun rose fully over Boston, talking quietly about everything and nothing. About the traitor Joseph and what would need to happen next. About Emily's mother and her improving health. About the future that suddenly seemed possible instead of terrifying. Finally, Alexander sat up reluctantly. We should get a few hours of real sleep. Then we deal with Joseph. Are you ready for that? For what happens when we confront someone who betrayed us? Emily thought about the men who'd broken into her apartment. About Kayla being interrogated. About all the ways this betrayal could have ended. I'm ready. He put me in danger. He put you in danger. He needs to face consequences. He will. Alexander's voice carried cold promise. I'll make absolutely certain of that. They slept for a few hours. Emily curled against Alexander's side, feeling safer than she had in months. When they woke, Teresa was in the kitchen making breakfast, giving them both knowing looks but saying nothing. Just smiling in that satisfied way that suggested she'd predicted this outcome weeks ago. By noon, Alexander had confirmed Joseph Ferraro's betrayal through phone records and surveillance. The cousin had been selling information to the Bratva for 3 months, including details about Emily's location and Alexander's movements. We confront him tonight, Alexander told Emily over lunch. At one of our warehouses, neutral ground where we can have a direct conversation about his choices. I want to be there. Emily, that's not... I want to be there, she repeated firmly. This started because of me. I deserve to see how it ends. Alexander studied her, then nodded slowly. All right. But you stay close to me. And if things escalate, you do exactly what I say without question. Agreed? Agreed. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Emily looked at herself in the mirror. She'd changed in 2 weeks. Still the same person on the outside, but different inside. Stronger. More certain. Connected to a man and a world she never could have imagined. But she'd chosen this. Was still choosing it. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The warehouse in the Port District smelled like salt water and old concrete. Emily stood beside Alexander as his men secured the perimeter, their movements efficient and silent. She'd insisted on coming despite his protests. And now she was here, watching his world operate in ways she'd only glimpsed before. Joseph Ferraro arrived 30 minutes later, flanked by 2 men who looked nervous. Joseph himself tried to project confidence, but Emily could see the fear in his eyes when he spotted Alexander waiting in the center of the empty space. Cousin, Joseph said, forcing a smile. I got your message. What's this about? Don't insult me with pretense. Alexander's voice was cold, nothing like the warmth Emily had experienced just hours ago. You've been selling information to the Bratva for 3 months. Phone records, surveillance footage, financial transactions. I have evidence of everything. Joseph's face went pale. Alexander, I can explain how you sold out your family? Explain how you gave Russians the location of a woman under my protection? Explain how you nearly got her killed? Alexander took a step forward. Please, cousin. Explain. I had debts. Gambling debts. They were going to kill me if I didn't pay. I needed money, and the Russians offered good money for simple information. You didn't think they'd use that information to attack us? To threaten an innocent woman? Alexander's control was absolute, but Emily could feel the fury radiating beneath it. You put my entire operation at risk. You put her at risk. For gambling debts. Joseph's eyes flickered to Emily, then back to Alexander. Something desperate entered his expression. She's just some waitress. Some girl you're sleeping with. Is she really worth destroying family over? We can work this out, Alexander. I'll stop. I'll make it right. She is not just some waitress. Alexander's voice dropped dangerously low. She is under my protection. She is mine. And you endangered her life for money. Joseph made his fatal mistake then. Perhaps sensing he had nothing left to lose, he turned to Emily directly. You think you're special? You think he really cares about you? You're just convenient. Another pretty face in a long line of... He didn't finish. Alexander moved with shocking speed, crossing the distance and grabbing Joseph by the throat, slamming him against the concrete wall. Emily flinched but didn't look away. This was the reality of Alexander's world. This was what protection looked like from the inside. You will not speak to her. You will not look at her. You will not even think about her. Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper, but carried through the entire warehouse. Do you understand? Joseph nodded as much as the hand on his throat allowed. Alexander released him, stepping back with visible effort at control. You have two choices, Alexander said. You leave Boston tonight, permanently. You never contact anyone in this family again. You disappear completely and hope the Russians don't decide you're a liability. He paused. Or I handle this the traditional way. Right here, right now. I'll leave, Joseph gasped, rubbing his throat. Tonight, I'll disappear. Just let me go. Alexander looked at his men. Get him out of my sight. Make sure he's on a plane by midnight. I don't care where it goes as long as it's far from here. They dragged Joseph away, his protests fading as they exited through a side door. Emily stood frozen, processing what she'd just witnessed. Alexander turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. Are you all right? I think so. That was intense. That was mercy. In my world, betrayal usually ends differently. He moved closer. Are you having second thoughts about all this? About us? Emily considered lying, but he deserved truth. I'm scared of what you're capable of this world, but I'm not having second thoughts about you. I went into this with my eyes open. Relief flickered across his face. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression hardening. When? How many? A pause. Send our response. Standard protocols, and get Nicholas here immediately. He ended the call and looked at Emily. The Russians just sent a representative to one of our legitimate businesses. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? You. They want you handed over as compensation for the disruption we've caused their operations. Or they're threatening full-scale war. Emily's blood ran cold. What did you tell them? I told them to prepare for war. The next week was unlike anything Emily had experienced. Alexander's home became a command center. Men came and went at all hours, bringing reports and receiving orders. Maps covered the dining room table. Phones rang constantly. The machinery of Alexander's organization became visible in ways it hadn't been before. Emily met Nicholas Bianchi on the second day. Alexander's best friend and second in command, was tall, dark-haired, and carried himself with the same deadly authority as Alexander. His blue eyes were sharp and assessing when Alexander introduced them. So, you're the one causing all this trouble, Nicholas said, studying Emily with unnerving intensity. I didn't mean to. No one ever does. He circled her slowly, evaluating. You know what you've gotten yourself into? What being with him means. I'm learning. Fast learner, I hope. Alexander doesn't let people in easily. The fact that he's risking war with the Bratva over you says something significant. Nicholas stopped in front of her. Don't make him regret it. I won't. Nicholas held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Welcome to the family, Emily Grant. Try not to die. Despite the gruff delivery, Emily sensed approval. Alexander confirmed it later that evening, when they had a rare moment alone. Nicholas likes you. That's rare and valuable. He doesn't trust easily. He's intimidating. He's supposed to be. But he's also the most loyal person I know. If something happens to me, he'll protect you. I've made sure of that. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not. But in my world, you prepare for every possibility. Emily spent time with Nicholas over the following days, learning the structure of Alexander's organization. She was surprised by how much was actually legitimate business. Real estate, import-export companies, private security firms. The illegal activities existed, but they were smaller than she'd imagined, more focused on protection and territory than the violent criminal empire she'd feared. She also called Kayla, finally able to check on her friend properly. Kayla was fine, protected by discreet security she barely noticed. She knew something had happened but accepted Emily's vague explanations about relationship drama and needing space to sort things out. You sound different, Kayla observed. Happier. Whoever this guy is, he must be special. He is, Emily agreed, glancing across the room where Alexander was deep in conversation with 3 men in expensive suits. Very special. By the end of the week, arrangements had been made. A neutral meeting ground, mediated by a council of older family heads who'd been operating in Boston for generations. The Bratva would present their grievances. Alexander would present his evidence of their violations, and both sides would negotiate terms to avoid the bloodshed neither actually wanted. The meeting took place in a private room at an exclusive club that served as traditional, neutral territory. Emily accompanied Alexander, dressed in a simple black dress that Teresa had insisted was appropriate. She was nervous but determined. This had started because of her. She deserved to see how it ended. The room was elegant but understated. A long table with chairs on both sides. At the head sat 3 older men, the mediators, each representing different factions of Boston's underworld. The Russians arrived with 4 representatives, all hard-faced men, who looked at Emily with calculating interest that made her skin crawl. Alexander sat at the opposite end with Nicholas beside him and Emily on his other side. His hand found hers under the table, squeezing briefly before releasing. The head mediator, an elderly Italian man named Salvatore Costa, spoke first. "We're here to resolve the dispute between the Rossi family and the Bratva organization. Both sides will present their cases. We will determine fair resolution. Dmitri, you first." The lead Russian representative, a man with cold gray eyes and a thick accent, leaned forward. "Alexander Rossi has interfered with our business operations. He paid off a debt that was ours to collect. He threatened our collectors. He has cost us significant revenue and embarrassed us in front of other operations in the city. We demand compensation." "What form of compensation?" Salvatore asked. "The woman, Emily Grant. She created the debt. She should fulfill it." "No." Alexander's voice was flat and absolute. "That's not happening. Then we have no choice but to respond with force. Full-scale conflict until appropriate compensation is received." "Before we discuss compensation," Alexander said calmly, "perhaps we should discuss your organization's violations of established protocols." He nodded to Nicholas, who spread documents across the table. "These are records of Bratva operations over the past year. Predatory lending targeting civilians with no criminal connections. Extortion of legitimate businesses outside your assigned territory. Attempted recruitment through coercion rather than choice. 3 murders of civilians who couldn't pay impossible debts. All violations of the agreements that allow your organization to operate in this city." The Russian shifted uncomfortably. Salvatore examined the documents with growing disapproval. "These are serious accusations," the mediator said, "and if true, represent significant violations of our established rules." "They're true," Alexander confirmed. "I have witnesses. I have financial records. I have everything needed to prove that the Bratva has been operating outside acceptable boundaries for months. Emily Grant is not a criminal. She's a civilian who was preyed upon during a family medical crisis. The fact that you're demanding her as compensation proves my point about your methods." Dmitri's face darkened. "We operate within our rights." "You operate like thugs," Alexander cut him off. "And it stops now. Here are my terms. You forgive all civilian debts currently on your books. You restrict your operations to agreed-upon territories. You cease targeting people with no criminal connections. And you never, ever approach Emily Grant or anyone connected to her again. And if we refuse," Alexander's expression turned glacial, "then we go to war. And I promise you, Dmitri, you will lose. I have resources you can't match, alliances you can't break, and the backing of every other family in this city who's sick of your organization's reckless methods, endangering the peace we've all worked to maintain." He stood, and suddenly the room felt smaller, dominated by his presence. "Emily Grant is under my protection. She is mine, publicly and officially. Touching her means war with me, and war with me means war with every allied family in Boston. Is that really a fight you want?" The silence stretched. Emily could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Then Salvatore spoke. "The evidence presented is compelling. The Bratva has indeed violated several agreements. Alexander's terms are reasonable given the circumstances. He looked at the Russians. I recommend acceptance. The other two mediators nodded agreement. Dmitri looked furious but cornered. Finally, he nodded stiffly. We accept the terms. The girl is off limits. Our operations will adjust according to the agreements. We consider this matter closed. Excellent, Salvatore said. Then we're done here. Dmitri, your organization will submit to monitoring for the next 6 months to ensure compliance. Alexander, you will provide detailed evidence of past violations to our council within 1 week. Both sides will maintain peace. Any violations from either side will result in severe sanctions. The meeting ended. The Russians left first, Dmitri throwing one last look at Emily that promised he wouldn't forget this humiliation. But he'd agreed to the terms. It was over. Outside the club, Emily finally allowed herself to breathe. Alexander led her to where their car waited, his hand protective at her back. That was terrifying, she admitted once they were inside. I know, but necessary. You needed to see how this world really works. The negotiations, the politics, the constant balancing of power and territory. He took her hand. This is what my life looks like, Emily. Meetings and threats and always playing chess while everyone else plays checkers. Can you live with that? She thought about everything she'd seen over the past week. The late-night strategy sessions, the constant vigilance, the weight Alexander carried every single day, the violence lurking beneath the surface of every interaction. This was real. This was permanent. This was the world she'd chosen when she'd chosen him. Yes, she said finally. I can live with that, as long as I'm living it with you. Alexander pulled her close, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of relief and gratitude and something deeper. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. I won't let anything happen to you. Ever. That's a promise I'll keep until my last breath. I know. I trust you. The words felt monumental. Trust. Real trust. After everything. After seeing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. She trusted him anyway. They drove back to Beacon Hill in comfortable silence, hands linked between them. The immediate threat was over. The Russians had backed down. Emily was officially, publicly, under Alexander Rossi's protection. Safe in a way she'd never been before, but she also understood now what that safety cost. The constant vigilance, the negotiations, the chess game that never ended. Alexander played it all so she didn't have to, bore that weight so she could have peace. That night, lying in his bed with his arms around her and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Emily thought about everything that had led here. The desperate choice to borrow money from criminals. The terror of the break-in. The moment she'd sent that text asking for help. Every decision that had brought her to this place. This man. This strange new life. She didn't regret any of it. Even knowing what she knew now. Even understanding the true cost and complexity of the world she'd entered. She'd choose it again. Choose him again. Because Alexander Rossi, dangerous and powerful and complicated as he was, had seen her when she was invisible, had protected her when she was vulnerable, had given her back her life and her mother's life, and somewhere in all that, she'd fallen completely in love with him. She hadn't said it yet. Neither had he, but the feeling was there, undeniable, and growing stronger every day. They'd have time for words later. For now, wrapped in safety and warmth and each other, this was more than sufficient. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow always did in Alexander's world. But they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with the Bratva at the neutral meeting ground. 6 months of building something real from the chaos that had brought them together. Emily stood in front of the mirror in Alexander's bedroom, adjusting the deep burgundy dress she'd chosen for the evening. 27 years old today. A year ago, she'd been drowning in debt and fear, working double shifts and watching her mother slowly die. Now, everything had changed in ways she still sometimes struggled to believe were real. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Feeling great today. Dr. Wells says my scans are still perfect. Enjoy your evening with Alexander. Love you. Emily smiled. warmth flooding her chest. Sarah had completed her chemotherapy treatment 5 months ago. The cancer was in remission. Monthly scans showed no signs of recurrence. Her mother was healthy, vibrant, talking about going back to work part-time at the clinic where she'd been a nurse before the diagnosis. It felt like a miracle every single day. The apartment Emily officially lived in, a modern penthouse in Back Bay that Alexander had purchased and put in her name 2 months after the Russian situation was resolved, remained mostly empty. She spent maybe 2 nights a week there, and those were usually when Alexander had late business that kept him out until dawn. The rest of the time, she was here, in his space, in his bed, in his life. They'd never formally discussed moving in together. It had just happened organically, her belongings migrating from the Back Bay place to Beacon Hill, until Teresa started doing Emily's laundry along with Alexander's and keeping her favorite tea stocked in the kitchen. Emily heard movement in the living room and smiled. Alexander had been mysterious all day about tonight's plans, insisting she be ready by 7 but refusing to explain anything else. She applied minimal makeup, pulled her hair into a loose updo, and slipped on the heels that made her legs look longer than they actually were. When she emerged from the bedroom, the entire apartment had been transformed. Candles everywhere, casting warm, flickering light. Soft Italian music played from hidden speakers. And in the dining room, the table had been set for 2 with fine china and crystal that Emily had never seen before. Alexander stood by the window, dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows in that way that always made her heart beat faster. He turned when he heard her approach, and the look in his dark eyes made her forget how to breathe for a moment. "You're beautiful," he said simply, crossing to her and taking her hands. "Happy birthday, Emily. What is all this?" "Dinner. I cooked it myself, so lower your expectations accordingly." He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his entire face. "Come sit." He'd actually cooked. Emily discovered this as he brought out course after course from the kitchen, each dish more impressive than the last. Homemade pasta with a sage butter sauce, chicken piccata that melted on her tongue, roasted vegetables seasoned perfectly, bread that was still warm. "Alexander, this is incredible. Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me. Before she got sick, she used to insist I spend time in the kitchen with her. Said that a man who couldn't feed himself was only half a man." His expression softened with memory. These were her recipes, the ones she made for special occasions. Emily felt tears prick her eyes at the significance of that. He'd made her his mother's special occasion food, had shared something deeply personal and precious. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It means more than you know." They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Emily told him about her classes at Northeastern University, where she was enrolled in an evening nursing program. The workload was intense, but she loved it. Loved learning about anatomy and pharmacology and patient care. Loved knowing she was working toward something meaningful. "How's your clinical rotation going?" Alexander asked, refilling her wine glass. "Exhausting, but amazing. I'm at Boston Children's Hospital right now. Pediatric oncology. It's heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. These kids going through hell but still smiling, still fighting." She paused. "I think I want to specialize in oncology. After everything with my mom, it feels right. You'll be excellent at it. You have the right combination of compassion and strength." They talked about the cafe too. Emily had returned to working at the Morning Brew 3 mornings a week. Not because she needed the money, but because she genuinely enjoyed it. The routine, the customers, the comfort of making coffee and chatting with regulars. And Alexander still showed up at 7:15 sharp every morning she worked, ordering his double espresso and leaving ridiculous tips before they'd leave together, his hand finding hers as they walked out. Kayla was still there too, still her friend despite everything. The protection had been reduced to occasional check-ins after the Russian agreement held firm. Kayla knew most of the truth now, knew who Alexander really was, and what Emily had gotten involved in. She'd been surprisingly accepting about the whole thing. "He makes you happy," Kayla had said simply, "and he kept you safe. That's what matters." "Speaking of Kayla," Alexander said, as if reading her thoughts, "she's dating one of my security team. Did you know that?" Emily laughed. Marco? Yes, she told me. She says he's the first guy in years who actually listens when she talks. Marco's a good man. If he hurts her, I'll have to kill him. But he's a good man. Please don't kill your own employee over my best friend. I make no promises. The easy banter felt natural now. They'd found a rhythm over the past 6 months, learning how to navigate the complications of their very different worlds. It wasn't always easy. Emily still struggled sometimes with the violence that lurked beneath the surface of Alexander's business, with the late-night calls and sudden departures, with the reality that the man she loved was capable of things that terrified her when she thought about them too hard. And Alexander struggled with his own demons, the constant fear of losing her, the hypervigilance that never truly turned off, the nightmares where he didn't arrive in time, where those men in her apartment did what they'd intended. He woke sometimes in the middle of the night, reaching for her, needing to confirm she was real and safe and still there. They'd learned to talk about it, real conversations about the challenges and fears and complications. Therapy helped too. Alexander had surprised her by suggesting they see someone together, a therapist who specialized in relationships affected by trauma. They went every other week, working through their issues with professional help instead of letting them fester. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and honest and theirs. After dinner, Alexander brought out a chocolate cake that Teresa had made, 27 candles flickering on top. Emily made a wish and blew them out, thinking about how much had changed in 1 year, how far she'd come from that desperate, drowning version of herself. "I have something for you," Alexander said once they'd finished cake and moved to the living room. He handed her an envelope, simple and cream-colored. Emily opened it carefully, pulling out a legal document. It took her a moment to process what she was reading. Deed of ownership. Morning Brew Cafe. Owner. Emily Grant. She looked up at him, confused. "I don't understand. What is this?" "I bought the cafe 4 months ago, quietly, through a shell corporation. The previous owners were planning to sell to a developer who was going to tear it down and build condos. I couldn't let that happen." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "That cafe is where we met. Where I spent 6 months falling for you without knowing how to tell you. Where you worked yourself to exhaustion trying to save your mother. It means something. So I bought it, and I'm giving it to you. To do whatever you want with it. Alexander, I can't accept this. A business it's already done. The papers are filed. You're the legal owner. Whether you keep it as a cafe, sell it, turn it into something else entirely, that's your choice. I'm not trying to control you. I'm giving you options. Freedom to choose your own path." Emily's hands shook as she held the deed. The meaning behind the gift overwhelmed her. Not the monetary value, though that was substantial, but the symbolism. The place where they'd met now belonged to her. The site of her struggle and eventual salvation was hers to shape however she wanted. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you deserve to have something that's entirely yours. Something I didn't rescue you into, didn't buy to keep you safe. Something you can build however you choose." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "I know you worry sometimes that everything in your life now is because of me, that you're dependent on me in ways that make you uncomfortable. This is my way of saying that's not true. You're your own person, Emily, with your own dreams and your own future. I just want to be part of it if you'll let me." The tears fell freely now. Emily set the deed aside and moved into Alexander's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you. I've loved you for months, but I was scared to say it. Scared it was too fast or too intense or that you didn't feel the same. But I love you, Alexander Rossi. Completely and terrifyingly and permanently." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Have loved you since before I knew your name. Since I watched you slip an extra pastry to that struggling college student and thought, there, that's what goodness looks like." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I can't promise you a normal life. I can't promise there won't be danger or complications, or nights when you hate what I am and what I do. But I can promise I'll love you through all of it. That I'll protect you and choose you and build whatever future you want as long as you're in it. I don't want normal. I want this. I want you. With all the complications and challenges and fear. I want the real thing, not some sanitized version. Then that's what you'll have. All of me. exactly as I am. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, the weight of their declarations settling into something solid and permanent. The future stretched ahead, uncertain in its details but certain in its foundation. They'd face whatever came together. Eventually, they moved to the terrace. The same terrace where they'd first really connected 6 months ago, where Emily had found Alexander at 3 a.m, and they'd sat in companionable silence while the city hummed below them. The view hadn't changed. Boston spread out in all directions, lights twinkling like stars, the harbor dark and vast beyond. But everything else had transformed. Emily was no longer the desperate woman drowning in impossible choices. Alexander was no longer the isolated man carrying his burdens alone. They'd found each other in the chaos and built something real from the wreckage. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, his arm around her waist as they looked out at the city. "That a year ago, I thought my life was over, that I'd made choices that would destroy everything. And instead, those choices led me here, to you, to this life I never could have imagined. Do you regret any of it? Even the scary parts?" Emily considered that seriously. The terror of the break-in, the weight of owing money to criminals, the violence she'd witnessed in Alexander's world, the constant low-level fear that came with loving someone who lived perpetually in danger. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret any of it, because it was all necessary to get here, to find you, to become who I am now." "And who are you now?" "Someone stronger. Someone who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to reach for it. Someone who understands that safety and love sometimes look different than we expect them to." She turned to face him fully. "I'm yours, Alexander, and you're mine. That's who we are now." He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Happy birthday, Emily Grant. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing past what I am to who I want to be, for giving me something worth protecting beyond duty and obligation. Thank you for saving me, for seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me back my life and my future." She smiled. "And for the cafe. That was either the most romantic or most insane gift anyone's ever given me. Both. It's definitely both." They laughed, the sound carrying out over the city, and stayed on that terrace until the night grew cold and the lights began to dim as Boston prepared for dawn. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Emily had classes in the evening. Alexander had meetings with associates from New York. Life would continue in all its complicated glory. But right now, wrapped in each other's arms with the city as their witness, they had everything they needed. Love that had survived trauma and fear and the weight of impossible circumstances. Partnership built on honesty and choice and genuine understanding. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Real life never was. But it was their ending, their beginning, their middle. Everything they'd fought for and chosen and built together from the ashes of who they'd been before. And standing there in the darkness before dawn, Emily knew with absolute certainty that she'd do it all again. Every terrifying, impossible, beautiful moment. Because it had led her here. To him. To home. The city stretched below them, full of danger and possibility and everything in between. But up here, safe in Alexander's arms with her future spread out like stars, Emily had never felt more certain of anything. They'd found each other in the darkness, and together, they'd face whatever came next.